Several weeks ago, the Reverend Dr. Tanika Shepherd, one of our alumni, preached about the tension of the mountaintop when Jesus was with Peter, John, and James up on a mountain praying. And this mountaintop theme shows up in this Sunday's lectionary. So in this story, as Jesus was praying, a supernatural event occurred. Elijah and Moses were there, and they were talking with Jesus. It was a holy moment. And part of the story that we tend to skip over is what they were talking about, Jesus' departure from the earthly plane. So while all this was happening, Peter, John, and James were nearly asleep, and it makes you wonder how long they had been on that mountain. And they woke up to this remarkable and supernatural event. Moses and Elijah were preparing to leave, and Peter, who just really wants to hold on to the divine part of Jesus, and can you blame him? Peter blurts out, "This is amazing. Let's build 3 memorials or buildings or shrines, and the 3 of you can stay up here." And the text says, Peter did not know what he was saying. Hold on to that detail, and we'll go back to it in a few minutes. But back to the story. A cloud appears and covers the gathering and says, "Listen to my son, the chosen one." And then Jesus was there alone, and the disciples said nothing to no one about what they saw on that mountain. And they walked down the mountain and never spoke of it again. I have so many questions about this text. In this Lenten season, we are reflecting on our own mortality. Everyone dies, and yet this scripture confronts us with this supernatural, dazzling event on the top of a literal mountain. And it's like the culmination of the entire biblical narrative. The truth that God does care about ordinary people, that God uses normal people to save entire communities, that God uses normal people as the world's prophets. And still, Jesus was in this literal supernatural community with Moses and Elijah. But it's like the disciples were not supposed to see that truth. This event happens as they are literally falling asleep. And then when they tell Jesus what to do, let's stay up here and make these supernatural moments permanent, away from the world, God literally shows up and says, "This is my son, listen to him." And the disciples then never talked about what they saw again. Now, I think, like the disciples, we are all praying for miracles right now, and I confess that I wrote in this past week, but it could be a more existential statement. In this past season, let's say, I have had many moments where I just wanted to disconnect, and there are moments where I think, this world is broken. We are all thinking and aware of situations that are ongoing where powers consume more and more and more in order to simply gain more, and innocent people are killed or traumatized or used up. This is not new, but it is in stark relief, this continually growing gap of inequality between those who have so much more than enough and those who do not have enough to survive, and let alone to thrive. And then, as always, racism is not new. Racism has different shades and flavors depending on the context, but there are new public awarenesses of how it has a hold on our communities and our nation. We do have pockets of justice, and justice that can never replace those who have been killed, but we know that there is still so very far to go. So I wonder if Peter, John, and James were facing similar situations, because after all of them had some sort of established lives that they walked away from to follow Jesus. Maybe their lives at home were not perfect, but they had lives, they had routines, they knew how to make things work, and now following this Jesus around, their lives looked fundamentally different. They see Jesus performing these amazing miracles. When you go back to Luke, in this chapter alone, we have Jesus giving the disciples authority over demons and diseases in verse 1. Verses 10 and 11, Jesus healed everyone who needed to be healed within a crowd that gathered. Verse 17, Jesus fed the 5,000 men and the women and children. Verse 22, Jesus foretold his death and resurrection. So you look at all that has happened just in this tiny slice of time through Jesus, and all of these things that the disciples witnessed. I can see how tempting, how desirable, how life-giving it would be to just simply focus on the good, the things that Jesus has done and is doing, and to stay in the presence of Jesus, and to stay on the mountaintop and turn your back to the brokenness of the world and cling to miracles. To stay on the mountaintop. I'm not the first one to preach this theme. We heard it a couple of weeks ago, and it is true. So when Peter cries out, let's build monuments for you, Jesus, and for Elijah and Moses up here on this mountain, Peter is saying, and I have compassion, Peter is saying, I'm willing to do anything to hold on to this sacred moment, to make it permanent, to stay up here on this mountain, and to hold on to what is reassuring and supernatural and not of this world. And so isn't that what a transfiguration is? Turning something ordinary, like a time of prayer, into something extraordinary and supernatural and out of this world. So remember a few minutes ago when I told you we were going to revisit a detail in the text? Remember when Peter blurted out his plan and said, let's stay up here, and the author of Luke said, Peter did not know what he said. I think that Peter blurted out words that meant, let's hold on to this moment forever, and I cannot blame him for his words because sometimes I want that too. But Peter wanted to hold on to the moment so desperately that God actually showed up in a cloud and said no, shut him down, said, listen to my son. It was a very parental moment. And so then Jesus and the 3 disciples left, and the disciples said nothing to no one. So I wonder if those of us in this centrum and online, we long to be transfigured and we long to become completely opposite of everything that we are. But stick with me here. Jesus doesn't promise that we will be transfigured. We don't shed our humanness when we have a relationship with Jesus. Jesus instead promises us transformation. Now, I am a United Methodist. You all know this, like you know this. But when you look in the United Methodist hymnal, the word transfiguration only shows up 2 times. Isn't that interesting? And at both times it shows up, it refers to Jesus being transfigured. But the word transformation shows up so many times. So many times. Isn't that a telling reflection of our faith? And transformation always refers to us as humans. Transformation is in our liturgies. How about the waters of baptism and how they transform us? But they don't transfigure us. We're still human. How the life-giving bread of communion transforms our hearts. If you dig into Wesleyan scholarship, Charles Wesley's conversion was a spiritual transformation. He was still himself, but he was transformed. So transformation is what happened to the disciples. They were still who they were fundamentally, but they were different, and they encountered the world in a very different way. Another example, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was transformed. She was still herself, an unwed, very young woman in a complicated situation, but she was transformed because God used her as she was. Transfiguration invites us to imagine the impossible, the improbable, to hear the voices of the prophets saying, this is the world as it is now, and this is not as it should be, and justice, justice, justice is coming. Transfiguration belongs to the divine, but transformation is how the work of transfiguration takes place in the world. So here's some real talk. And I'm preaching to myself here, so don't get mad, because I'm talking to myself too. Have any of us in our own lives wished for the easy, immediate, life-changing experience of transfiguration when we're not willing to do the hard work of transformation? So 3 examples. Co-learners, and we're all co-learners, faculty, staff, students. How many of us were not the strongest at, let's say, studying or scholarship or discipline or time management before you came to MTSO? Or maybe you thought you were good at it. And then when you received that acceptance letter, and then when you Zoomed with the registrar to schedule your classes, and you showed up to orientation all sunshiny and bright and nervous and happy, you thought, this time it's going to be different. I'm going to study 10 hours a day. I'm going to write all my papers promptly and with discipline. I am going to manage my time to prioritize my schoolwork while also maintaining all of the aspects of my life and not listening to the dean when she said, what are you going to give up as you come to school? Were you setting your sights on a transfiguration, an easy change that you had no role in, rather than engaging in the hard work of transformation, reordering your life so that you could be successful in your studies and your shifting understanding of your call? Man. So another example. There are those of us, I think everyone in this room, either implicitly or explicitly, in the ministry you are called to do, you are helping organizations become more welcoming, more inclusive, more anti-racist. And you may or may not use those vocabulary words, but the goal is that everyone actually belongs, and you change whatever organization or organizations you are serving. Sometimes we want that, and we want to force a magical transformation instead of leaning into the incremental and challenging work of, we want transfiguration, and we aren't willing to do the work of transformation, which takes time. MTSO, this is my primary appointment. I am full-time. Also, you'll see me online sometimes working with like annual conferences and agencies and other organizations around diversity, inclusion, conflict management, other duties as assigned. And it's a helpful way for us to reflect upon what we do here and how it can be timely as you are going out in the world. But there's often, when myself or when I'm with a team, there's an image of an organization, a hypothetical version of whatever organization, what it looks like when it's healthy. Welcoming includes like some of the hallmarks, comfort with conflict. So conflict is okay because it means that you're digging into something challenging. Prioritizing marginalized voices. Doing things that are not exciting but very meaningful, like aligning budgets and policies to help for greater inclusion of everyone and a sense of shared belonging. That's what a healthy, belonging, anti-racist organization looks like. And you know what? You cannot achieve all of that immediately. Oftentimes I'm doing a little workshop and I will joke, but I'm not joking, but it lowers the temperature. Like, we're talking about diversity and inclusion or anti-racism. Like, remember, we aren't going to solve racism by lunch, but you can see people kind of relax because they're like, okay, this is a long haul kind of thing. Just because we're having a conversation doesn't mean we're gonna fix all the problems. It takes organizational shifts in mindset, changes in individual priorities, and it takes discomfort. And it is good to have a hunger to be transfigured, to have that new prophetic reality come to fruition. We need that hunger. But in order to get the transfiguration, you have to go through the slow work of transformation. So if this is a part of your service to the world as you are thinking about your current and next season, are you willing to step away from pushing an unsustainable, quick transfiguration? And are you willing to lead a group through the sustained work of transformation? Ministry is hard, but that's how you make change that sticks. And my last example, new church starts in new faith communities. They can often fall into the trap of thinking, oh, if we just start something new, then we can be transfigured and create the perfect new, welcoming, vibrant church where everyone belongs, everyone gets along, everyone agrees, and Jesus is Lord. So there can be a lot of power in gathering people for a new thing. That's why, to me, academic institutions are joyful, because we have new students, and those of us who are around longer, we get to become a new thing once a year, twice a year. There's power in gathering people for a new thing, and it can be argued, like, I agree with this statement. Starting a new church means that it doesn't necessarily have the baggage of 20, 50, 100, 200 years of history. And you can gather a new group of people in a new faith community, but consider the source material. Your primary source would be the people. They're all bringing their religious experiences, the DNA of the organizations that shaped and formed them for good and their bad, and their strengths and biases. And also, why are they coming? What are they running away from? What are they rejecting? So, for example, you may be trying to build a faith community that is committed to being anti-racist, and a lot of the language in different denominations is using the language multi-ethnic. The new people you are gathering are probably fully on board, but do they actually have experience in a church that has practiced that well? Have they ever done this before? Probably not. Are they looking for transfiguration? It's good to have hopes and goals, but are they coming and saying, we're going to be anti-racist from day one without practice, it will be fine? Or do they need to be guided through an ongoing journey of transformation and learning how to be anti-racist as a church in a way that fits their context and the community of the now and the not yet? It's a muscle that you have to grow. You don't just go to the gym on day one and you're fine. You go, you do a couple things, and then your body hurts for 3 days. So this school, MTSO, we have been transformed. We admit students twice a year, as I said. We let students complete their degrees on different timelines. This changes who we are as an institution. We have normal faculty and staff transition because of moves, retirements, vocational discernment, changes in life seasons. We also have all of the denominations and traditions that we serve in local churches and nonprofits. All of them contribute to the ongoing transformation of this institution as this school seeks to respond to how we offer our educational experiences and our institutional scholarship to the church and the world. Transformation is hard, and it is incremental, and it's very human. Now, the Transfiguration narrative, the mountaintop narrative, centers on how Jesus is fully human and fully divine. We have the biblical narrative that has all of these examples of both. Jesus can spit in the mud, spread the mud on a man's eyes and give him sight. Jesus Christ can also pray on a mountaintop and be visited by Moses and Elijah. Transfiguration is the bridge between the infinite power of Christ and our limited humanity, and our human tendency to turn away from the brokenness of this world or to look for a shortcut when we realize the road ahead is long. Now, we are in Lent. Lent is a season where we have this opportunity to be reminded of our own humanity and also to lean even more fully on God as we attend to the brokenness of this world and to do our part in helping this world better reflect God's will for the universe. So that's why we often pray phrases like, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So this afternoon, I would like to ask all of you, and I ask myself included, to ponder one question. Where in my life am I longing for transfiguration when God is pointing me to transformation? This could bring up questions of call, of vocation, meaning making in the world. This could touch upon the sustainability and honesty, sustainability or not, of how you are organizing your life and your time and energy. It could connect to a new awareness of where you are in your life, your age, and how much time you may have to engage in a particular service to the world in a given way. So the question again is, where am I longing for transfiguration when God is instead offering me transformation? As we observe the realities of this world today, and in this Lenten season, may the divine give us the strength and the steadiness to look at our lives and to ask ourselves, where are we grasping toward a magical transfiguration and ignoring the world? And may all of us have the courage and the wisdom to instead lean on God and allow ourselves to be transformed so that we may be of service in leading our communities to a transformed future. Amen.
Amen.